Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
We are having a good day today because we just got back from our first Personality Hacker private retreat where we had some clients come in, a handful of clients come in, and we did some work together over a period of 3 days by the ocean in New Jersey. It was let me just put it this way. I don't even know how to describe it because I think for us it was one of the best experiences we've had here at Personality Hacker, working with people and just getting to connect in a very human way and work through some of the things that people are bringing that are limiting beliefs and other factors in their life that they are wanting to either move past or work on to go to the next stage of their life. It was just a powerful experience. We're a little bit basking in the feelings it gave us.
Yeah. Well, the brains are a little spongy from all the work. I mean, because quite frankly, we were leaving this concept of a retreat sort of open. We were letting it emerge and see what would be the highest leverage, form of coaching to do for people who came to this retreat. You can kind of hear it in my voice too. Like I've done a lot of talking over the last 5 or 6 days. So
more than usual.
Yeah, more than usual, even more than usual. And so you can, like, the quality of my voice being a little grainy, that's kind of the quality of my brain right now too. It's a little grainy, it's a little spongy. And I think, what ended up emerging, which was different than I thought it was going to be, because I have this imprint in my head, probably from some of my previous mentors around digital marketing and being in information products. I have these imprints that you're just supposed to blast people with content, just overwhelm them with content, and then they'll go away happy. And when we were thinking about doing this retreat and I was modeling other people who have run very successful retreats, one of the things they kept saying over and over again is don't provide too much content. Don't teach too much content. Withhold from teaching too much content. And I'm like, okay, I got the message. But it's hard for me to get that message because I still want to blast people with content. So I've got pages and pages of things I want to talk about, and I've written up all these notes. And I think we might have gotten to like 2 things I wrote down. Maybe, right? Maybe 2 or 3 things. And then a lot of the stuff that we ended up talking about was very emergent to the context. So it ended up being very tailored to the people that were there. But one thing that surprised me was how many breakthroughs people were having. Like it kind of seemed like that was the point of coming, was to have a breakthrough. And I noticed that if you put people in a context, and everybody was intuitive in this particular group, so there was a lot of sort of similar challenges that people had experienced and faced. So just bringing people together in a context where you take care of everything for them. You remove any parts of life that pull at people's legs, right? And you just create a context where everybody can sit in almost like around a fire and be vulnerable and be in a space that everybody feels like very good and safe in. And then just kind of kick over a first domino of a topic. One of the very first things we talked about was how type informs our limiting beliefs. We also talked about how type informs our leadership style. And it didn't take much. People just opened up, and that's all they needed. They just needed a platform to be able to open up and talk about their experiences and the things that they'd been dealing with and going through. So it was kind of beautiful. It was like a really beautiful thing to see happen in front of us. And I think the reason why we left because it just was really powerful for me. I think I left changed, honestly, personally. And that's amazing to run a retreat, and then it was a game changer for you as the person running the retreat. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah. For me, it changed me. And that, I think, that was sort of the power of it. Is I think everybody that was involved, whether it was people on the team or we hired a chef, and he left, he said he was changed. Like everybody in the whole context was changed. So it was really amazing. But the theme that kept coming up over and over was our relationship to our parents. That was something that just, that was the emergent of the entire week, I think.
Yeah, it was surprising because this is our first one to do, and so it was almost like not a test. We were going to treat it very seriously and real, but we didn't exactly know how all the details were going to play out. So we left things, like you said, very open-ended. I have not been in flow for 3.5 straight days like that in memory. I don't know if I've ever been in flow for that much time, to the point where like we during the morning meditations, like because we had like a Cheris on our team was doing morning meditation with everybody, and we were getting ready to talk about a certain topic, and during the meditation it was like, no, I just had this instinct, we need to be talking about leadership, like you mentioned, because I just watched something that triggered me on that, which I want to talk about on a future podcast, but not today. But yeah, so it was interesting to see how things were almost coming to us in the moment. Very co-creative. Other people, things were coming to them in the moment. And one person, when we were going around the first night, okay, why are you here? What are some of the things you want to be talking about? We got to one gentleman and he just said, I actually don't know. I've just been listening to your podcast for like a long time now, and I just really trust you guys, and I hope you can help me. And we're like, help you with what? He's like, I'm not exactly sure yet. That's what I want to talk about. And first of all, it's very, very honoring to have somebody that trusts us that much. So then it's like, oh no, all the pressure's on the first night. Like, oh, I hope we can deliver, and I hope we can help, make an environment where people can see those breakthroughs you talked about, Antonia. And the other piece about this too is, like you mentioned, I was surprised at how powerful this was. Like, there were 4 of us on the personality hacker team, you and myself, Nee, who works with us, who you've heard on the podcast, you've been listening for a while, and Cheris, and all 4 of us afterward were sitting around the table, talking about our experience. And we were almost dumbfounded on how profound and powerful it was. And not because of the things necessarily we did, but the environment and the context we created that was just a place where change could happen. And so I was impressed on how much we decided to make changes in our lives based on this. In fact, that's what we want to talk about today, is something that was an insight for you in the midst of all of this. Because if you've been listening for the past few episodes, if you're a new listener, you go back just a couple episodes here, and Antonia's been going through some challenges in her life. So we've been talking about that on the air, obviously. We've been sharing some of the things that she's working on, and some of the comments and things we get back from people are like, oh, you're okay, Antonia, keep going, don't get discouraged. It's nothing like dire. She's just working through some personal issues. And this retreat, I think, made a big shift in you personally.
Yeah, 2 things came up, 2 massive game-changing emergence. And you're right. I mean, it has become like the Antonia's struggle podcast.
Public therapy.
It's somehow, just because I'm going through some shit, somehow just everything became about me, or keeps becoming about me. And by the end of the podcast, I'll look at Joel and be like, how did that become about me again? But that's, I guess, go with it, right? So it's an emergence. So let's just do this thing.
I'm authenticity. The more personal, the more universal, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, and that was one thing that happened at the retreat, is I was talking about how these podcasts seem to keep being about me, and how I get a little self-conscious because I assume nobody wants to hear about my challenges. Like, I mean, it's nice to hear about people's challenges in order to model it and kind of see what's going on and how they deal with it. But if it gets too much about the hosts and not as much about the topic ostensibly that they're supposed to be talking about, then there's like this fine line of like, oh, they're not really personality hacker, they're like themselves hacker, right? And so I didn't really want to go too far down that road. But then at the retreat, people were saying sometimes those are the most powerful episodes, because we can speak to it with, kind of come in from the inside and sort of model how we're figuring things out. So I made a vow to myself. This is not one of my 2 major things. This is just like a smaller aha, because there was a bunch of stuff. There's so much stuff came up. But this is one of the smaller ones. And the smaller one was, I'm just going to stop being so self-conscious about talking about myself. I'm just going to do it and just be like, I guess if this is not the podcast people want, they'll go find another one. And most of the time I'm not dealing with anything this intense. And so I really would say in those times my life is pretty mundane and boring. But when I am going through something, I'm just going to do it. So yeah, this is going to be about me and maybe a little bit about Joel. This podcast. But the 2 major ahas I had is the first one is, this is what we were meant to do. Like, this is our calling. The first retreat went so well, and not just me and not just you, but our team. Like, it was the first time I felt like our team had been practicing our instruments separately. And then the retreat was all of us getting up on stage like a jazz improv group and just started to play together. And it was beautiful. And it was even really healing, I think, for our team. Because, when you work together, there's always going to be something about somebody did something to piss you off, right? Because you're working together. You're all trying to get goals accomplished. Somebody's in charge of one thing, another person's in charge of something else. The first dozen times they do that thing wrong, you're like, okay, it's fine. Let me just fix it or handle it, or I'll teach you how to do it again. But on the 13th, on the baker's dozen time, that 13th time, you're like, how do I get this person? Like, do I have to hire a hitman, or what? How do I solve this problem? Like, it gets intense, right? When you're all working together. And so I think all of us being able to see each other at our best and the skills we really come with, I think it was, it was really cathartic for the team to be able to just appreciate each other's genius, the mastery that each other had. So this is what we were supposed to do. I don't know if it's forever, but for sure right now, this is the direction we're supposed to be going. And so it made it really clarifying, because I think I've been talking about this in particular. I don't know about PH. I don't know what I want to be doing. Do I want to keep going with the podcast? It's like kind of emotionally draining. Do I have, like the last podcast was, do I have a fear of success, right? Is that what's holding me back? Like, what's going on?
You needed your why is what it was, right?
Yeah, I needed my why. I had lost sight and I had forgotten. And like you said, people are emailing in with, it's kind of like running a marathon and just like hearing these people on the sidelines, like cheering and clapping and like handing you water and stuff. And like, it's cool. You can go, you can keep going. It's going to be fine. You just got 10 more miles. And you're like, okay, I'm at the midway point. So I think that's been awesome. Maybe me bitching about my situation has allowed me to receive positive feedback from our audience, which is probably something I needed to hear. And on top of that, the retreat was like, okay, now I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And everything that isn't around helping people in that specific way, I think is going to be, I talk about going down to the premise level, what stays, what goes. Anything that doesn't allow for subsidizing that experience is it's gonna come on the chopping block. Not necessarily like it's going, but I'm gonna ask some serious questions around it, because I think that's I personally feel like that's the calling right now.
My challenge is, when you say that this is what we're born to do, we only had a handful of people there. And I think we really impacted lives. And I'm always like, but how do we scale bigger? How do we get bigger? How do we, I struggle with the, and I've even talked about this, and again, a future podcast, this idea of little leadership, doing something with the abilities you have in the moment of the present place and the people you have available to you. And I'm like, well, what if we're only helping handfuls of people at a time? Are we reaching enough people? Are we able to affect enough impact? And then I got to check in. Well, is that ego talking, or is that genuinely me wanting to help all those people? Because I didn't think about that at all this weekend. Like when we were actually working together as a team, and it wasn't just our team. What's so great about the people that showed up to this retreat was they came ready to do some pretty deep work with each other. And everybody was supportive, co-creative, and contributive to the entire experience. We're leading it, right? We're on the quote unquote front of the room, helping to orchestrate and lead some of the conversations that are happening. And there's some private conversations that happen too, but the public, hot seat format of working together on one person's issue of breakthrough was powerful, because you got not just our perspective, but the other high-level people. When I say high-level, people that are serious about growing themselves in a room with you. It was intoxicating. Mm-hmm. It was intoxicating. And so it's, that's what comes up for me when you say that. But what is so that was the first thing. Do you feel like you're ready to talk about the next thing? Because I think that's what I really want to talk about today.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel complete about that whole finding my purpose in life thing. Yeah, I feel good about that. The second major aha is, like I mentioned, it was surprising how much the topic of our parents and any wounding or trauma or just unresolved issues came up around parents. So I'm sitting there at the front of a group coaching experience, and I'm hearing one person after another talk about their relationship with their dad or their relationship with their mom. And one person who had some cool insights for the entire group and some breakthroughs. His father had just recently passed, I think maybe not even quite 6 months ago. And so for everybody who was dealing with their dad stuff, he was a reminder, and he was such a lovely human being, an NFJ, just like this incredible person, just this lovely spirit. And he kept reminding people, yeah, well, once they die, you don't get to say anything because his father had just died. And he's like, remember, when they go, you don't get to talk about to them anymore. You can have the conversations in your head, but let me be a testament to, if you don't say something, you might not get that opportunity. So my dad, who I found out 4 days before our retreat that he had another stroke. And this one was bigger than the first. The first stroke that had them realize that he's probably got early stages of dementia. Now, I guess apparently the reports have gone back and forth on whether or not that's accurate, whether or not he actually does have beginning dementia or it could be something else. But regardless, this is his second stroke. He's in his late 70s. The life expectancy for most of the men in his family is around 81. So I have no idea how much longer I'll be able to have conversations with my dad. And if he does have dementia, just being physically alive doesn't mean he'll be able to have the conversations that I think that I still need to have with him. And so my parents, I've talked about it many times. My parents don't talk to me. The last time we went to Oregon, they wouldn't really even look at me, which was pretty painful and hurtful. And it's all based on religious ideology, and, I don't believe what they believe anymore. And this is apparently, in their opinion, the loving statement that they love me so much that they'd rather treat me like a pariah so that I change my behavior and think like they do again. Because, of course, they believe that my immortal life is on the line. And so much of what we do, so much of what I do and my parents and everybody else does is such a jacked up version of love, isn't it? It's like all meant to be love. Sometimes we just don't have the skill developed to be able to do it well or right. And we have all this stuff. Anyway, the point is that they haven't been talking to me, and they haven't talked to me in probably about eight years now, right? And I thought, man, I'm just not going to push them. I'm just not going to push them because I get it. I understand. I sympathize. I recognize why they're at where they're at. And also, what really hit me and struck home is that I have some major needs going on around this, and I might not let them be able to get away with that any longer, because there are some difficult conversations that we need to have that they have figured out a technicality to not have to have.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting about it now is your dad's actually called you a couple times.
Well, speaking of technicalities, what's great is that, it's great in the sense that it's like the one good thing to come out of this whole thing is that in the religion, shunning is the one time that you can get away with free and open communication. Relatively speaking, free and open communication with somebody who's being shunned in your family specifically is when there's a family emergency. Like, that's the one time if somebody's in the hospital, if something's gone down, right? Like, a major family emergency is the one time where the rules, it's all, as I talk about, it's also stupid. But it's like the one time where you're allowed to have free conversation with your shunned or disfellowshipped family member. So my dad called me every day. Every day since he's been in the hospital, my dad's been calling me. And I'm like, okay. So he just was desperate to connect. He was desperate to talk to me. So I guess it's impacted his right hand, his right leg. He's in physical therapy right now. It didn't, my first husband's father had a stroke, and it just completely incapacitated the left side of his body. And I remember that. I remember thinking, I heard that he had a stroke, and I heard that it was affecting half his body. And the first thing I thought was, oh shit, he's just got no control. But he does, and he's in physical therapy right now. And he was kind of joking with me about how he picked up a cup of coffee in his right hand and it just exploded. He doesn't even know what happened. It was just the cup exploded. And so he's not just talking to me, he's teasing, right? And being funny. So I'm sitting there. I'm supposed to be the facilitator of this group coaching experience. All these people are talking about how they're going to go back and have these difficult conversations with their parents and unresolved issues. And I'm just going, fuck. I got to go see my dad. Oh, I just dropped the F-bomb tonight. We'll have to make this one explicit lyrics. Oh, well.
That's why I'm writing a note right now to make sure I put an explicit lyric label on this one.
Oh, good.
That's what I wrote down.
All right. Well, now that the seal's broken, I'm just going to talk like I talk. So, which will be scandalous for some. They're like, even on the drunk podcast, you only dropped the F-bomb once. I was like, I know, I was so good.
I would
caution against being a sailor.
The reason why is you might limit people being able to share this with family members. This would be a great message to hear.
I'm with you.
And they don't understand who we are, and so they might be like, oh, like,
I'm with you.
They can't share it with somebody they want to share it with.
Okay, I'll be the best behaved version of my authentic self. So yeah, I'm like, I gotta go see my dad. So after the seminar one day, I think it was Friday, I bought tickets. To go see my parents, and I fly out tonight, or today actually, right after we finish this podcast.
In fact, we have to wrap up in a little bit because we're not going to make the flight if we don't wrap up soon.
Yeah, this is all very exciting, right? So right after this podcast, I go through a couple things in my backpack. I'm going to go take a flight out to Portland. I'm going to spend 5 days, and my dad's in a hospital in Vancouver. I'm not going to tell them. I'm not telling them I'm coming. This is all going to be like a TV show, right? Like I remember in TV shows in the 90s where people would just show up. And I was like, who just shows up? Nobody just shows up. You always tell somebody you're coming. That was one of those tropes. There's like a couple different TV tropes that I've never understood. One of them is when somebody walks into a room in a group full of people and they say, I need to talk to you. And every other person in the room just leaves the room. I'm like, when does that ever work? You always grab the person and you take them to someplace else. Nobody ever clears a room, right? I mean, unless you're like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, nobody clears a room. So that's one of the tropes. And the other tropes I always thought was, you always tell people when you're coming. Who just shows up, right? And the answer is me. I'm going to be the person who just shows up. And I'm doing it so that my parents can't have a retreat strategy. I'm doing this specifically so that they can't use their tactics to figure out how to get away from me. I'm just going to show up at the hospital. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know. And
just Instagram the whole time. Just share it with the world as you do. Make it a reality show.
Yeah, because that'll keep it real authentic, right? I'll keep it real. I'm just keeping it real with my Instagram story.
The Kardashians would do it.
I know. Which is the marker for deep, deep authenticity. So yeah, so I'm just going to show up and we'll see what happens. But this week is going to be about me. I'm not going to force anybody to do anything. So I don't like to use the word force. But what is one layer, one rung under force?
Coerce?
That sounds
pretty severe. That sounds like a legal term.
Yeah. It's not going to be coerced. Whatever is like one step removed from force. I'm going to have these conversations with my parents. These difficult conversations that they have a loophole around. I found a loophole in my favor. There's a family emergency. I'm showing up. We're talking. We're going to have these conversations. And they've been deferring these conversations for almost a decade. And I'm not going to let them get away with that anymore because we don't have time. So I've got a little bit of pressure on me. I've got a little bit of pressure on I have to have the conversations this week. Otherwise they'll never happen. So I'm trying to let go of outcome.
You nervous?
I'm so nervous. I haven't been this nervous in memory. I don't get nervous anymore. Right? Like if you're used to doing all the things that other people find nerve-wracking, but you've been doing them for so long, like being on camera, being on a microphone, being on stage, these are the things that most people get nervous about. You do that stuff often enough and you just eventually get to a point where like, oh, that one was bad. I guess whatever that was. But I am nervous.
Is it the hurt or the just not knowing what's going to happen? Like, what are you nervous about?
I have a fear. I'm overly attached to outcome. My nervousness is that
it's your one shot.
It's my one shot. And that's not true. It's not true. I can do this again. Hell, I could do this again next month, right? Like if I wanted to. So there's a bit of an attachment to outcome. I'm nervous that I'll be able to finally have the conversations with my parents that I've been wanting to have for like a decade. And just like that thought it hits me. So there's like nerves around not knowing how that's going to pan out.
Yeah.
So there's that. We just got done with the retreat and as you could probably tell, I'm a little raw. So I'm nervous about entering it a little raw, but I'm also thinking that that's on my side because I think people are persuaded by emotion. So let's see if my parents can be persuaded by the real emotion that I don't have the energy or the reserves to be able to hide. Like I'm a raw nerve right now. And so we'll see what happens.
I'm noticing a pattern in most people's lives, or a lot of people's lives, where there's I'll call it a reconciliation process with your parents. I guess you could say making peace with your parents. And some people, it happens after their parents pass away and they're in their older years, near the end of their life. Some people do it right around college age, but I think a lot of people end up doing it right around middle age, sometime between 35 and 50, or 35 and 55. And probably the pressure of your parents aging is one thing that causes it to happen around that time period. We talk about the squeeze with middle-aged people, where you have kids and you've got a spouse or, a partner and a career, and you're in the height of your prime earning years, and you don't get any tax breaks, and you don't get the senior or student discount, and you've got aging parents that may or may not need help, and you just feel a lot of pressure. And I think that a lot of people in the moments of that, there's a window that opens for people. If they haven't made peace with their parents up to this point, there's an opportunity a lot of people have around this time period in their lives that they could have a conversation with mom or dad or both about some of the things that they need resolution or at least closure around. Maybe your parents weren't that great to you. Maybe your mom and dad weren't together. Maybe you had some family trauma or family issues that were never resolved, and you're carrying those with you throughout life. And there's this moment that comes where you have an opportunity. And I think this is what you're probably feeling, Antonia. I know you were tearing up. I'm doing a little talking to let you regain some composure. There's this moment where you are like, this is the window. This is the opportunity. Your dad's 78, and he's now had 2 strokes, and we're never guaranteed tomorrow. And so you're sitting here going, it's really not a convenient time for you to be doing this. Like, we've got projects we're trying to close out. We've got family coming this weekend that we were already planning to host. And like, there's a lot of stuff coming up, and you're like, no, I need to do this. And I'm like, absolutely, let's make it happen. Because I actually had this experience on my side a couple of years ago, and mine was not a good situation. Like, I was telling some of the clients and students this weekend that came to the retreat that something snapped in me about 3 years ago on New Year's Eve. My whole family was there. Something happened with my nieces, and I would be embarrassed for any podcast listener to see my behavior that night. I lost my mind, and it had been like an unhealthy buildup of unresolved issues with my mom and dad. And all of a sudden, I'm just, and another thing, and I'm yelling and I'm pointing, and my mom is like, oh my gosh, she's like, grabs all like the little kid, all the kids, the grandkids, and takes them upstairs to watch the ball drop on New Year's. I start like around 10 o'clock at night, and I just go off for like 4 hours straight on my dad and my brother and my mom when she was around, and I'm just losing it, and I'm blaming, and I'm acting poorly, right? I'm exploding outward. And then I spend basically the next 6 months to a year playing cleanup, taking my parents each individually out to lunch to apologize and explain, okay, I'm blaming you for these things, but here's actually what's going on for me. And then my brother and sister-in-law, I had to apologize to them as well because they were there. And just go through the process of sober-mindedly having the conversations that I should have been having all along. I let it build and build and build to a New Year's Eve situation. Family gatherings, I think, put pressure on you. And I exploded. And that might be something that happens for you listening too. Maybe there was a time where you blew up, and now there's still unresolved stuff. And I think that these moments that come up for us are important. I think there's something to be said for making peace with your parents. And I think it is something that I think most adults will have to do at some point in their lives if they want to live a full, vibrant, rich, healthy life.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be that your parents, were abusive, or you have...
Mine were great.
Yeah, tons of trauma, or they don't have to not be talking to you because, they're in a cult and you're not anymore, or whatever it is. Like, it can just be, I'm watching myself create context and do things to Piper and to the boys that I'm like, yeah, they're going to have to make peace with me for that in the future. Like, you just can't help it. It's kind of awful. You're going to do something that messes your kids up on some level, a little bit, right? And it's easy. It's so easy to blame and, create persecutors out of our parents and think terrible things and like be victims to them. And in some ways we are. And also I don't think that we have to take it as like take it upon ourselves as an identity. like we're victims to our parents. I think that we can be empowered and assertive to go have conversations with them that we need to have. I don't plan on having blamey conversations with them, by the way. I'm not going to confront them. That's not my plan. I want to go tell my dad how appreciative I am, that I know that raising children was not something that he felt qualified to do, because he comes from he's the product of neglect, basically. Like, he was raised on a farm back in the 40s and nobody paid any attention to him, number one. And then when they did, it was a lot of, it was just like, you're a nuisance, you're in the way. So neglect is sometimes worse than abuse, right? And so he was raised the product of neglect. He still has like pain in his toes from when he was a little kid, like Piper's age or younger, and he sliced his foot open and nobody would take him to the doctor in the hospital. He had to wait for his older brother to get home from something because his mom looked at it and thought it was gross and said, no, I don't want to see that, and just shoot him away. And so then his brother took him to some doctor that shoved a bunch of like whatever was coming out of his foot back in his foot and sewed it up. He still has nerve damage and nerve pain, like legit 70 years later. I mean, that's horrible, right? And he went from that to he wasn't the best dad. He wasn't the most skilled, but he didn't leave us and he didn't neglect us, right? He had some anger management issues. It wasn't always okay. But where he came from, he had no model. He had nothing in front of him because just nobody was around. So he did the best he could, and he did what his version of love was. And so I just want to go thank him for that. Before he dies, I want him to know that I really appreciate that. With my mom, I'm not going to blame her. I get it. I see the same etymology story from her. But we need to talk, and she needs to understand where I'm coming from, and she can't kick that can anymore. So they're not conversations that will be blamey. At least I don't feel they will. If that emerges, I'm going to let myself feel some pain and allow myself to have them take responsibility for the stuff that is theirs. I mean, if they choose to take it on. But my God, how much am I going to be crying during this podcast?
I don't know. It's all good though.
All right, let's try to steady the voice and keep going. Stiff upper lip. Anyway, so yeah, it's just going to be real. Like, they're not blamey conversations. They're just real conversations. And so, yeah, that's me attempting to make peace with my parents at this phase or at this stage. I have a feeling like if my observation for everybody in that retreat is accurate, I have a feeling it's going to be really powerful. So, so that's me doing it. And so like this podcast I'm just realizing this podcast will probably be called Making Peace with Your Parents. And unfortunately, I don't have any specific content around this. Like all I know is that I need to. Like, I don't have any how-tos yet. I just know that it needs to happen. And I'll report back. We'll probably do the next podcast. I'll be like, all right, I'll tell you how it went. Because I honestly don't know. I am going to try not to be too attached to outcome. That is my number one goal, is to just get real chill and very meditative and recognize this is more about the process than it is about the outcome. The outcome is a wild card, but I know I need to not fear the process because it will be uncomfortable, which it probably will be. And I need to not fear that there's no ROI on that. I'm feeling that the most important thing for me to focus on is the importance of this, not whether or not it's going to be comfortable or fun. And then allow the outcome to emerge, because if I start thinking this is going to be awkward and not fun and painful, and it might not even turn out the way that I want it to, now I'm thinking in terms of ROI, right? In return on investment. But this is family, right? It's not really something you think about in terms of ROI. Like, that's not what family is. That's kind of the point of family. It's like the one place you don't think in terms of ROI. You think in terms of this is where our processes get crafted. And I can think about other stuff in terms of ROI.
ROI meaning return on investment, in case you're not familiar with that abbreviation. I think that the idea of not being attached to outcome is probably the best thing you listening could take away from this. And what I'm taking away from this idea as well, when I talked to my parents a couple of years ago after that kind of big explosion and I had to play cleanup because I behaved badly and did a lot of blaminess, those conversations were not blamey. Those were just peaceful, a lot of expression of appreciation and love, and hey, here's some things that I disagree with you on. We see things differently. I have gone a different path, and it was so restorative, but I wasn't intending it to be. I just wanted to, well, the only outcome I had there was to make sure I apologized for bad behavior and say, hey, that was not acceptable, and own my stuff, basically. And then the conversation naturally emerged into all the things that we had ended up talking about in a hostile way, or I had been talking about in a hostile way that one night. I was able to calmly now talk through some of those things without blaming and say, that was mostly emotion. I didn't really mean it this way. Here's actually what I meant to say more specifically about the issue. So I think this idea of not thinking in terms of outcome is so powerful. And I've been thinking a lot about this notion of difficult conversations or crucial conversations. There's even a book called Crucial Conversations on our bookshelf, on our mini stack of books that I keep compulsively getting and never getting through because we're book junkies, right? And I know the general premise of the book and the idea behind, basically, you will get as far in life as you're willing to have the difficult conversations to go that far. So, for example, you are the measure of the kind of conversations you're willing to have, or the difficult things you're willing to express or work through gives you a sense of how far you're able to take your life as far as whatever you've defined success as, personal, professional, anything, spiritual, that kind of thing. So I think there's something to be said for having those crucial conversations or critical conversations with people in your life, particularly family, that can really make an impact. And just, I think it's so powerful. A podcast a long time ago, we talked about this concept of every action we do with each other as people. Listen to this for a second. If you're listening, just listen to what I'm about to say and let this sink in for a moment. Every action we do with each other as people is basically us either asking the question, do you love me? Or answering the question, yes or no, I love you. Like literally everything, right? And maybe it's not literally everything, but it's a good framework to come from, especially if you're thinking in terms of your family and you're like, why is my mom behaving this way? It's frustrating me and I can't get past this. Remember, she is thinking what's making sense for her, and it may not be love directly toward you or asking the question directly toward you, but it might be asking for herself, like, do you love me, to herself? And there might be like bad behavior there. Maybe there's some substance abuse or some bad behavior in something, and you're like, what's going on? And it's her desperately trying to get the question answered, am I loved? Does somebody love me? Even myself. Am I loved? Do you love me? And I think all of our actions in our lives are asking each other, especially family, do you love me? And we're looking for the answer to be yes, obviously. And the actions back speak a yes or a no, or maybe a fuzzy like, I don't know. I don't know how to interpret that. Is that a yes? Is that a no? And if you start thinking in that framework, that really shifts your perspective to see your parents in a different light. And if you're a parent, maybe shift your perspective to see your children in a different light. So I think that's one thing that we could say that's, I don't know if it's practical, but I think it's more accessible than just go make peace with your parents. That's one thing to think in terms of. And then the other thing is, if you focus on process of answering the question, the unconscious question that we're all asking ourselves, do you love me? If you're answering that to your parents, yes, Mom, I love you. Yes, Dad, I love you. And it's just getting that clearly to them, regardless of outcome. That is powerful. And not even just for them to hear, but there's something in us mechanistically. There's something in us when we project and share love, genuine, heartfelt love for the people in our lives. It shifts something in us. We change, regardless if they accept it, regardless if it's something that lands, regardless of the outcome. It primes the pump of love coursing through your heart to the world and to the people that are close to you. That's the best place to start as an access point for blasting that love to the world. And I've noticed the more I do that with the people in my life, the more I express my gratitude and love for them, the more I feel a flow of love through me, which is really powerful.
Yeah. I don't think it's any accident that I'm doing this right after I've run a retreat where I was so, like my mission in life, it became so clear. I don't think there's it's coincidental maybe because of the conversations, or maybe not even coincidental, maybe serendipitous, or synchronistic that we were talking about family and parents a lot, and then I realized I needed to go do this. But I don't think it's an accident that I immediately booked my ticket. Not just thinking, man, I should do that, but like immediately booked my ticket. And I think it's because the retreat and being on purpose and being on flow made me so, like, it put me in a position to be so resourced. I knew I could handle it. So I'm thinking that a leverage point too, or this is just sort of emerging for me as we're talking, but the leverage point too is that if you've got some shit around your parents or some stuff that you need to handle, and maybe it's not even a parent, maybe it's like an influencer in your life that took on a parent role, maybe an older sibling or a grandparent, or just somebody who filled one or occupied one of those roles for you. If you are considering this idea as we're talking about it, I think it's important to make sure you're resourced, because otherwise you're never going to do it. If you're always in this place where you just don't feel that good anyway, or you're just managing your energy, like you've got enough to get to work, to get home, clean your house once a week, make dinner, run the kids to soccer or whatever it is, right? Like you've got just enough to allocate to your life, then how are you ever supposed to have the level of overage required to tackle something like this? Because this is a major resource hog. I mean, I can already tell it's a resource hog. It's occupying all my thoughts. I'm nervous about it. Like I'm in a weird situation. I'm not going to be able to see my daughter for 5 days while I do it, right? So think Jeebus, and by the way, thank you so much, Joel, for being so supportive during this, because you're just like, yeah, you need to go do this. I'm looking at hotels, because normally I would just do it on the cheap, because that's how I've been programmed to travel since I've traveled so much in my 20s. I'm like looking at hostels and like, $30 a night or $40 a night to stay at a hostel. And you're like, are you really want to go to like talk to your parents and then come home and sleep in a bunk bed around 7 other people? I'm like, no, probably not. And you're like, go treat yourself. So I'm going to go stay in a hotel I've always wanted to stay in Portland. I'm not going to do it on the cheap. I'm going to like do things nice, and I'm going to make sure that I'm resourced. So that's a financial expenditure. So I had to be financially resourced to do that. You are being generous to gift that to me so I can just have that experience I need. And you're handling a lot this week, by the way. This is like a really inconvenient time for me to go. Like you've got you've got your parents and guests coming this weekend, and we're going to have all 3 of the kids. And I mean, it's going to be kind of a nightmare for you. And you're like, just go. And I mean, there's a part of me that's like, I'm such an asshole, like doing this to you. But you're like, you need to do it. You need to do it now. Just make it happen. So it's like the resource, I have the emotional resource of you to lean on. And I'm in a financial position right now to be able to do this. Probably for the first time in my life, really, to be honest. I'm in a financial position to be able to do it well. And and so I don't want to discount that. Like if you're listening and you're going, man, I probably need to do that. Maybe the first thing you really need to do is get yourself to a place where you have the resource to be able to handle it. And that doesn't mean that, work a second job to be able to afford a luxury hotel in the city your parents live in. I'm not even doing that. I'm not staying in luxury hotels or anything. But I'm going to go stay at Edgefield and McMinimans, which if you're in the Pacific Northwest, you probably know what I'm talking about. I've never stayed at Edgefield. I've always wanted to. I got their cheapest room, right? Which is a single that you have to share a bathroom. But I'm so excited. I've never stayed at Edgefield. I'm like super excited by that. So just little things like that. Make sure that I because I'm in this position, the node of the resource is handled. And so this can be the emergent. And so I think making sure you're resourced in whatever that, don't undervalue how much it takes from you to have these difficult conversations, and do what you can to build a life so that when those difficult opportunities for them come up, you've got the overage. You can afford to do it, not just financially, but psychologically and emotionally. Like your soul has the ability to absorb whatever's coming, right? Because I know what's coming. So my soul is singing from this retreat. And so I think it's in a position to be able to take whatever blows come at it. If there are blows, I don't even know if there are, but I have to account for that being a possibility. So I think that's the other thing is being in a position to do it. Don't kick the can if you are in a position. Don't pretend you're not, right? But if you aren't, don't let it be pressured to go do something like this, and take care of the self enough to be able to have these crucial conversations. Yeah.
I think so do you have, you're probably not going to write it down because your thoughts are usually pretty organized. It's very emergent for you. You're not going to plan what you're going to say.
I'm not, no.
You'll probably just let it happen as you go. I'm just thinking about somebody that maybe there is some tension between you and your parents, if you're listening, and you want to talk to them or one of them and make some peace. And it's like, how do I frame this? How do I start? One exercise I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I always have these thoughts about how we do things in our society are so backwards. We just do things so weird. And the one thing I've always thought is weird when I go to a funeral and I hear a beautiful eulogy for someone where they detail the aspects of their life and people stand up and talk about what an amazing person that the person that passed away was. And there's all these beautiful comments and notes and perspectives on that person's life. I'm always sitting there going, I wish that person had been alive to hear all this. Like, I bet that person has never had a love bombing session where they've just heard amazing things about themselves from all the people that have mattered to them over the course of their life. And here, it's almost selfish. We hold it back from them until after they're dead. And I always think in terms of like our funerals to me are so selfish in a lot of ways. Like, oh, we're so sad this person passed away, boo-hoo. And I know it's like you're supporting each other and maybe a widow or widower if it's a person that's older. So I get why we do it. There's some some healing and some closure we have as people. But where were all those people that are at the funeral when that person maybe was dying or passing away or in the last stages of their life or just getting older and, they're lonely at home and they have no one to tell their stories to and grandkids aren't visiting them, everybody's busy with their lives. And there's no blame here. I guess I always just look at funerals going, it's very selfish to hold back all these positive things until the person can't experience it and feel that love from you. So what I've been really doing is I've been thinking about my parents and my grandparents as well. This happened years ago. I always thought, what could I almost like pretend like you're writing a eulogy for that person now? Like think about if you were at their funeral years from now and you were saying all the things you'd want to say about them to an audience of some strangers, some family, and that person's dead next to you. They can't see or hear you. And you're telling everybody else how amazing they were. Well, why not now write a eulogy in a sense? I mean, it's not morbidly, but just think about the things you would say at the end of their life that you would say about them and tell that to that person. I think this might be a good access point for you. If you don't even know, you're like, there's so many challenges with my mom or so many challenges with my dad. I don't even know where to start. Well, maybe start with what would you say at their funeral, at the end of their life? How would you communicate how they felt to you, to other people? And make some notes, make some bullet points, or just ruminate on it, think about it. And then why not express it to that person? Why not take a moment to tell that person all the things that you would say about them if they were dead, but tell them while they're alive so they can feel the full weight of how much they mean to you. And your parent, just in a particular thing, tell your mom how much she means to you, how much she impacted your life, the things you learned from her, the things you're grateful for, or your dad, the things that he did, and the perspectives he gave you, or the challenges he put you through that really shaped who you are today. And let them know this while you still have an opportunity to let them know this. If your parents are still living and accessible to you, I think that's a powerful access point and a starting point to let the people in your life know just how you feel. I didn't do this with my grandparents like I wrote it out, but I did near the end of all my grandparents' lives. I think my one grandfather, I was going through a lot of personal trauma in my life, so I didn't have a possibility to do this, but I spent time with all three of my four grandparents in the last stages of their life, like near, not on their deathbed literally, but like near the last year of their life. And I remember I did have some closure with all four of them, or all three of them, because my one grandfather didn't have an opportunity. But I did express things to them on how I felt, and I thanked them. And I said, I just really appreciate you being in my life and having impact on my life. And it was important, whether or not they received it or it changed anything for them, it was important for me to express that. It changed something in me. And I think that's my encouragement here. We're talking about don't think on outcome, think on process. It will change you. It will put a perspective into your heart that I think is super powerful. And you become a vessel of love and openness and kindness just because of that exercise. It's just so freeing and so powerful for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So off I go.
We'll check in next time, and even if it's a different topic, we'll figure out how this went. Maybe you'll have a ton of stuff to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling that it'll be some reframes. I don't know. Maybe it won't. Again, who knows what the outcome will be, but
You'll just drink Terminator stouts all day.
Yeah.
Sitting in McMinimans.
I'll sit McMinimans and drink stout. Yeah. I am planning on doing one very SI inferior or introverted sensing or memory 3-year-old activity.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to my hometown of Cascade Locks, and I'm going to grab a fiction book, and I'm going to walk to the East Wind Drive-In and get myself a mocha, and I'm going to listen to Rush on it'll be my iPhone now. It used to be my cassette, my little tape.
You should go buy a cassette player and go through the whole motions of like having an actual tape of Rush and like go through the whole SI thing.
I thought about that, but I probably won't.
If any city's going to have cassette players and cassettes to buy, it's going to be Portland.
It'll be Portland. Yeah, it's true. And I'm gonna listen to like Hold Your Fire or something. Nobody's a Rush fan anymore. It used to be like 20 years ago, I'd start talking about Rush and people like, be Rush. I'm not as big a Rush fan anymore, but like they definitely formed me during high school. So like probably legit nobody's a Rush fan. And if you went and found Rush music, you'd be like, what is this? Most people don't get into it. But there was a time period in the 90s where it was like a cool thing to do was being Rush. So I'm going to listen to like an old Rush album, and I'm going to walk down to Thunder Island, which is an island right off of Cascade Locks in the Columbia River. And I'm going to sit on the rock that I sat on when I was like 16 years old. And I'm going to read fiction, probably fantasy or sci-fi. And I'm going to listen to the music I listen to. And I'm going to drink the coffee drink I drank 20 something years ago. And and I'm just going to completely relive that childhood experience or that teenager experience. And I think, I don't know why, but something tells me that there's something there. Like there's something important for me to post-process. And because I'm in middle age now, right? Like I'm 40, I'll be 41 in a month. I'm not in childhood anymore. So I feel like I'm going to be able to process it in a way where I'm not as attached. Like I'm not in the experience anymore. So.
And you've been away for many years, so it gives you almost a fresh way to look at an introverted sensing experience.
Yeah, so I don't know. Again, it's process. I have no idea what the outcome is going to be. Maybe it'll just be like, this is something I used to do. That's cool. But I'm going to make a point to do it. And I don't know when I'm ever going to be able to do that again because, just getting to the West Coast by myself for 5 days in my hometown, right? That's something I haven't been able to orchestrate like in memory, especially since I've, been married with kids. So I don't know I'm going to get the opportunity again. So I'm just going to go check it out and see what happens. And I'm nervous, but I think it's going to be good. And I promise I will report back for anybody who's interested. And for all of you who are like, shut your damn mouth and stop talking about yourself and let's talk about some personality type stuff, there'll be more of that coming for you too.
Yeah. Yeah, we're actually have a renewed sense and vigor behind what we're doing. I think it gave us a lot of creative ideas this past retreat. Mm-hmm. And we know we need to be connecting with you on the ground. If you're listening, we need to come to your city where you're at and be a part of, the energetic interchange and meet you in person. And we've been experimenting and playing with meetups in the past recent, months and years. We've done one live podcast, but we need to start thinking in terms of how do we come and connect in person? There's such a powerful interchange when we get together as humans that you can't replicate digitally. That's just so important. And I think that's something we want to be looking toward as well.
Yeah. Our new model is do things that don't scale. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to, and I cannot wait for the next retreat.
Yeah. So if you're listening, we want to hear from you. What has been your experience with this? Have you had a time in your life? Are you young and you're like, oh man, this whole make peace with my parents thing? Yeah. All right. Are you middle age? Is this something that you're now it's really starting to come to a head and you're like, yes, this needs to happen. The clarity is there. Maybe you're in your older years and your parents aren't with you anymore. And I think there still can be some peace made where you go through the things about them, the gratitudes and the peace you would have made with them. And you can almost do it. You can do it within yourself in a lot of ways. Because again, it's not so much about the outcome, although the outcome could be amazing. It's about the process inside yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you leave a comment and you are in that position, because I can't speak to that since both my parents are still alive.
Same here.
Would love to hear how people who have lost their parents have been able to make peace. Like, what was the process they used? Because I don't have a frame of reference for that.
I think that would be really helpful for other people in the community and other listeners if you come and share your story about where you are on this journey. Is it something that you were just made aware of today? Like, man, I should have a conversation with my mom or dad. Or is it something you've thought about, you're just scared to, or you've done, or you've processed somehow? We want you to share your story because we can have everyone benefit from the stories we can share and tell each other. And maybe there's some advice or something that worked for you or something that you say, hey, be cautious around this. Don't get caught up in this thing because whatever. I don't know what it would be for you, but we'd love to hear from you. So come over to personalityhacker.com. Directly below this podcast is a spot for you to leave a comment, ask a question, share your story with us and the community at large. Speaking of the community at large, find Personality Hacker on the social media platform of your choice. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. If you want to find us on Facebook, it's a good place because we have a group and it's a good center point, a starting point. Facebook.com/personality hacker or Twitter.com/personality hack, HACK. And also you can find a lot of links on our website, personalityhacker.com.
Right. And of course you can subscribe to us, various platforms, iTunes, Android, etc. We had a quiet announcement around something that we can be a little louder about right now.
Yeah.
Our Personality Hacker book is finally published.
That's right.
And we said a quiet announcement before because we weren't sure when it was coming out.
There were a couple scheduling things that were challenging.
But it's out now. So you can go check it out on Amazon. It's called Personality Hacker, written by Joel Mark Winton and Antonia Dodge. I have no idea if it's a good book.
We haven't gotten our copy yet.
I haven't gotten my copy. So I don't know. So I think you should go read it. I think you should buy a copy. You should read it and you should give an honest feedback. So far we have 1 5-star review. That makes me very happy. But yeah, go read it. And if it's a terrible book, go ahead and say that too. That's fine. But you know.
Don't say, what are you talking about? Don't say it's a terrible book.
But remember, I'm about to talk to my dad and I'm in a very vulnerable time period.
I remember writing it, so I think it's a good book. I don't think
okay.
We vaguely have a memory of writing this thing.
I don't know. It wasn't like written in a coked up binder or something?
The manuscript. This wasn't like Stephen King. We're doing lines of coke on the side while we're furiously writing like The Stand or something.
Yeah, exactly.
He has no memory. He's like, I don't remember writing that book.
Yeah.
It just came out of me.
Yeah, so I don't know. It might be good, it might be bad, but who knows? Go buy a copy, support us and my vulnerable time period. Let us know if it's terrible. If it's a terrible review, just like don't write that one.
If it's terrible, just send us a private message. You don't need to put a review on Amazon. I think it's a good book though. Don't see this. I think people. What's great about it is it really dives into the cognitive functions, and we went through and we broke it down piece by piece by piece with visual graphics.
Yeah.
And we show you how to go from your 4-letter code to break down your cognitive functions into your personality. And then then it goes into each type. Like there's a chapter for each type. We talk about the firm model in detail, like we talked about on the past podcast. And there's reflection points in the book, so you can journal and reflect.
It's kind of like a journal. Yeah, it's a type-based book and a journal. So there's exercises in it. We talk about loops and we talk about grips and for each of the types, and we have journal prompts to really introspect and figure out how it's going, happening for you. The firm model's in it. There's a chapter on firm. And so I think it's a good book too. I actually think it's a solid book. The reason why I'm saying all that is because I never know how something is until after I get feedback, because I'm not great at creating good self-assessment. At the retreat, I was like, I think this is going really well, but I can't really tell until the end where people are like, this was a game changer. I'm like, yeah, right. It was, wasn't it? So anyway, the point is that it was a quiet opening and still we're getting a little louder about it. So go check out the Personality Hacker book. And we hope you enjoy it. I think it's going to be good.
Bring it to a meetup and we'll
sign it.
We'll sign it. That'll be cool.
That would be cool, right?
I think it would be fun. Would you enjoy signing book? Are you being sarcastic, or would you actually enjoy signing people's books?
No, that was sincere.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't sarcastic.
That's why I was asking. I couldn't tell if you were like, oh, that'd be fun, right?
That'd be fun.
All right, we got to get you to the airport, so we got to close this down. We're actually
go.
literally running out of time. Okay.
All right.
So, my name is Joel Mark Witt.
I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we will talk with you, and hopefully Antonia will have some good stuff to share about her trip to Oregon on the next Personality Hacker podcast. We'll see you there.